Tuesday morning, Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport. Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu, Nigeria's most celebrated man of God, sits in first class, sipping champagne, minutes away from takeoff. In his bag, enough cocaine to supply Lagos for a month. In his mind, absolute confidence that his spiritual protection will get him through customs. In 30 minutes, both his empire and his freedom will be destroyed forever. But this isn't just about drugs. This is about a family that pushed their son into hell, a charm that failed at the worst possible moment, and a secret that fooled 50 million Christians. You think you know this story? You don't. What really happened to Pastor Matthew will leave you questioning everything you believe about modern Nigerian Christianity. Ethiopian Airlines Flight ET9-1 to Dubai. First class, seat 1A. Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu adjusted his white agbada and smiled at the flight attendant serving him champagne. In 12 hours, he'd be preaching to 30,000 people at the Dubai International Christian Conference. His Louis Vuitton bag sat safely in the overhead compartment, containing more than sermon notes. The engines hummed, passengers settled in. Pastor Matthew led a brief prayer for journey mercies, and everyone bowed their heads respectfully. Then 3 NDLEA officers walked onto the plane. Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu, please come with us. The cabin went silent. Pastor Matthew's smile never wavered, but something cold gripped his chest. For 3 years, he'd made this exact journey 47 times. Never once had he been stopped. Officers, there must be some mistake. I'm Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu of Divine Destiny Ministries. The president knows me personally. Sir, we know exactly who you are. That's why we're here. As they escorted him off the plane, Pastor Matthew's mind raced. The coral bead around his waist, his spiritual protection, felt cold and lifeless. Something had gone terribly wrong. But what Pastor Matthew didn't know was that 18 hours earlier, he had unknowingly broken a sacred covenant that would cost him everything. Airport security room, no cameras, locked doors. Commander Ikechukwu pulled on latex gloves and opened Pastor Matthew's bag with surgical precision. Expensive clothes, golden jewelry, anointing oil, Bible, everything looked normal for a traveling pastor. Then Commander Ikechukwu found the hidden compartments. Packages, carefully wrapped, heavy, white powder. Pastor Matthew went pale. This is impossible. Someone must have planted. Sir, we've been watching you for 6 months. Every trip. Every contact, every transaction. Within minutes, photos exploded across Nigerian social media. Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu in handcuffs, surrounded by 2 billion worth of cocaine. The same pastor who preached against drug addiction, the same man who counseled government officials about integrity, the same spiritual father who raised 7 people from the dead. But this was just the beginning. The story of how Nigeria's most trusted pastor became its biggest drug lord started 15 years earlier, with a family that valued money more than ministry. Nsukka village, 15 years ago. Young Matthew Ikechukwu knelt in his family's small mud house, praying fervently while his parents counted money from their neighbor's latest business success. Look at Pastor Johnson, his father said, pointing to the television where a prosperity preacher stepped out of a private jet. That's what real ministry looks like, not this small church nonsense you're doing. Matthew had just graduated from seminary. His church had 200 faithful members. His monthly offerings could support a modest lifestyle. But for his parents, it wasn't enough. Your mates are buying jets and you're here with certificates, his mother sneered. Wake up before you shame this family. His elder brother Emeka had made millions in politics by 25. His brother Chindu sent dollars from oil deals. His brother Obina owned construction contracts across Abuja. But Matthew, he had chosen to serve God legitimately. This certificate cannot build a house, his father laughed, holding Matthew's seminary degree. Find another way or don't call me your father. That night, as Matthew prayed by his window, he didn't know his parents were already planning to solve his success problem permanently. The solution would involve a man named Pastor David Ogbu, and it would destroy everything Matthew held sacred. 6 months later, Pastor David Ogbu drove into their village in a Bentley that cost more than most people's houses. He was 32, smooth-talking, and supposedly pastoring a miracle ministry in Port Harcourt. That evening, he sat with Matthew's parents drinking palm wine and discussing divine business opportunities. Your son has potential, Pastor David told them privately. But he's limiting himself to traditional methods. There are supplementary revenue streams that fund real ministry expansion. Matthew's father leaned forward. What kind of streams? International partnerships, private donors. Very discreet, very profitable. How do you think the big pastors really afford those jets? The next day, Pastor David approached Matthew directly. "Look at your parents' faces," he said quietly. "They're ashamed of your small success. I can change that in 6 months, but you have to trust the process." "What process?" Matthew asked. Pastor David smiled. "Moving goods internationally, ministry supplies, very profitable, completely safe. I've been doing it for years." "You mean drugs?" "I mean funding real kingdom work. Are you bold enough to seize God's opportunities, or will you stay small forever?" That night, Matthew couldn't sleep. By morning, he'd made the decision that would destroy his life. But first, his mother insisted on spiritual protection. The journey to Baba Azugo's shrine took 3 hours through dense forest, where mobile networks died and GPS stopped working. This was where Nigeria's most powerful native doctor lived, the man who supposedly protected politicians, businessmen, and corrupt pastors from legal consequences. Baba Azugo was neither old nor young, with eyes that seemed to see through time. Around him sat expensive cars belonging to well-dressed clients, including 3 other pastors Matthew recognized from television. "You want to be untouchable?" Baba asked directly. Matthew's mother answered, "Yes, Baba, complete protection for his ministry work." Baba tied a red coral bead around Matthew's waist and placed a metal amulet in his bag. He whispered incantations in ancient Igbo dialect, calling on spirits older than Christianity. "You will be invisible to human law," Baba declared. "No scanner will detect you, no dog will smell you. No officer will suspect you." Then Baba pulled Matthew's mother aside for a crucial instruction. "Tell him this," Baba whispered urgently. "He must never engage in sexual activity with any woman during her menstrual period, especially before important journeys. If he breaks this covenant, the protection will shatter completely." But when Matthew's mother returned, she gave him only vague advice. "Be careful with women, don't let anyone corrupt your ministry." Matthew assumed this was general moral guidance. He had no idea about the specific taboo that protected him. That incomplete warning would eventually kill him. With Baba Azugo's protection, Pastor Matthew became spiritually bulletproof. His first drug run was flawless. No searches, no questions, no suspicion. Airport security treated him like royalty. The money was intoxicating. First millions, then tens of millions, then amounts requiring offshore accounts. He expanded Divine Destiny Ministries into a religious empire. 100,000 capacity Glory Dome, satellite churches in 12 states, a university, hospitals, and 5 private jets. Politicians sought his endorsement. International leaders invited him to conferences. By day, he preached powerful sermons about righteousness. His messages on breaking free from addiction drew thousands. Genuine miracles happened, people were healed, families restored. By night, he coordinated international drug shipments with Fortune 500 efficiency. For 3 years, the double life worked perfectly. The coral bead pulsed with protective power. Airport officials waved him through VIP protocols. His spiritual covering seemed absolute. He bought his parents a mansion, sent his mother to Jerusalem, gave his father a Rolls-Royce. The village celebrated him as proof that God blesses his servants. But spiritual covenants, like electronic devices, require proper maintenance, and one night of careless pleasure was about to crash his entire system. The night before his final flight, Pastor Matthew's younger pastors convinced him to join them at an upscale Enugu lounge. Even Jesus attended celebrations, they laughed. At the lounge, he met Blessing, intelligent, charming, magnetic. They talked for hours, then went to his mansion. In his bedroom, they made love passionately. She was gentle, present, everything he needed after years of ministry pressure, but Blessing was menstruating. And Pastor Matthew had no idea this violated the sacred taboo protecting him. As they slept peacefully, miles away in Ensaka Forest, the coral bead around his waist burned black. The amulet in his bag turned cold as death. 3 years of supernatural protection shattered like glass. Ancient spirits withdrew their shields, leaving Pastor Matthew exposed to the laws he'd been violating with diabolic immunity. The next morning, he woke refreshed, unaware his invisible armor was gone. He would discover the truth at 30,000 feet when Commander Ochukwu was already waiting. Federal High Court, Abuja. The verdict hit like divine thunder, guilty on all counts, 25 years federal prison without parole. The collapse was swift and merciless. Government agencies seized everything. Glory Dome, private jets, luxury mansions, the university, hospitals, satellite churches. Properties worth 50 billion were confiscated and auctioned. His parents' mansion was locked and seized. His elderly mother and father were forced back to their original mud house, cracked walls, leaking roof, no electricity. Divine Destiny Ministries was dissolved. The university closed, stranding thousands of students. The hospital became a government facility, television stations lost their licenses, church members scattered like sheep, some joined other ministries, but many lost faith entirely. Testimonies of miracles seemed tainted by criminal association. In 6 months, a religious empire worth billions became nothing but a cautionary tale. The village that once sang Pastor Matthew's praises now whispered his name with shame. Children learned new songs about the dangers of spiritual pride. And Pastor Matthew, he sat in maximum security prison, holding his powerless coral bead, wondering how divine protection could fail so completely. Federal prison, Cuge, cell block D. Every day, Pastor Matthew wrote letters to his parents that he never sent. You pushed me into this darkness. You were not satisfied with legitimate ministry success. You chose money over morality. You broke me by demanding what God never intended. I was not your son, I was your investment. You were not my wings, you were the chains that dragged me to hell. Not one letter came from home. Not one phone call, not even a visit. His mother told neighbors she had no son named Matthew. His father claimed he'd always warned against illegal activities. The village treated his family like carriers of a contagious curse. Former church members crossed streets to avoid them. Market women whispered when they passed. In prison, Pastor Matthew stopped speaking to other inmates. He declined religious counseling. He refused journalist interviews. He just sat holding the coral bead that had once pulsed with protective power, now cold and lifeless as his former dreams. Sometimes he laughed bitterly. The same charm that made him feel invincible had been his ultimate downfall. Protection without purity was just postponed judgment. Outside, Nigeria moved on. New scandals replaced his headlines. New pastors filled his vacuum. His name became a seminary cautionary tale. Pastor Matthew Ikechukwu became nothing but a story, a lesson about spiritual shortcuts and unholy alliances. Once revered, now forgotten. 10 years later, prison chapel. A small group of inmates gathered for Sunday service. Chaplain was late. From the back row, a graying man stood slowly, thinner now, wearing simple prison clothes. Brothers, Pastor Matthew said quietly, his voice still carrying traces of authority that once commanded 50,000 people, let me tell you about the difference between divine blessing and diabolic protection. The inmates turned to listen. I once thought I was untouchable. I confused supernatural protection with spiritual covering. I believed power from any source was blessing from God. He pulled out the coral bead that had remained with him through 10 years of imprisonment. This was my confidence. This was my security. This was my downfall, because protection without purity is just postponed judgment. A younger inmate raised his hand. Pastor, how do we know the difference? Pastor Matthew smiled sadly. Real blessing from God never requires you to violate your conscience. If your success demands secrecy, if your prosperity needs deception, if your breakthrough requires diabolic assistance, run. He sat back down. I had genuine calling. I had authentic ministry. I had legitimate success, but I threw it all away chasing shortcuts that led to destruction. Outside the prison chapel, Nigeria continued its complex dance between traditional religion and modern Christianity. New pastors rose to prominence, new scandals emerged. But in that small chapel, among men society had discarded, a former megachurch pastor had finally preached his most important sermon about the difference between divine blessing and diabolic deception. What shocked you most about Pastor Matthew's fall? Share your thoughts below. If this story opened your eyes to the dark side of prosperity gospel, smash that like button and subscribe for more explosive Nigerian scandals that'll leave you speechless. Hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss our next shocking expose. Thanks for watching, and remember, not every miracle is from heaven.